Thank you for tuning into the live show. You know what time it is. It is your boy Genesis. Yes, I just had a call with Enterprise for some reason. I had to settle some situations. But anyway, we are back. Welcome to the live show. Of course, some of you know that Canada just had their election, and some people would say, unfortunately, the Liberals are in charge of Canada. And some people would say maybe they got what was coming to them. But who knows, ladies and gentlemen? Who knows? But one thing is for sure, the fact that Canada is moving towards the left, is literally on the left right now. I don't know. Okay. I just don't know. What will the relationship with Canada be like with the United States moving forward? Now, one thing I can tell you one thing for sure, Canada is most likely not going to be the 51st state of the United States because obviously this person here right now does not like Donald Trump, does not admire his works, does not think everything he stands for is worth it. So this is going to be a tough 3 years for Trump when it comes to Canada. Of course, Canada needs the United States. However, this guy who won the election, he is pretty much connected in the EU according to um, my studies. All right. All right. Here we go. Mark Carney. So Mark Carney now is the Prime Minister of Canada, and he is definitely um, on the left. So this is definitely going to be a huge deterrent to Trump and what he stands for. But let's see what CNN has to say. But first of all, I want us to go through the first 100 days that Trump has been in office, and let's see what the people are saying when it comes to the economy.
On the central issue that got him reelected. You guessed it, it's the economy. And this just as he's about to mark 100 days back in the White House. Let's get straight to our CNN political director and Washington bureau chief, David Chalian. David, nice to see you. The president's approval has sunk to a historic low here, and now we're getting really more detailed data about the economy. It doesn't look good.
Yeah, which is, as you stated and know, issue number one, and clearly what delivered him back to the Oval Office. And we asked people in our poll, these are brand new exclusive numbers from SSRS. 28% of Americans in this poll rate the current economic conditions in the country as good, 71% as poor. Take a look here when we asked, have Trump's policies affected U.S. economic conditions? How have they affected it? 59%, nearly 6 in 10 Americans say they've worsened conditions. Only 27% say they have improved conditions. How does that compare over time? Look here. Back in March, it was 51% who said his policies worsened conditions. That's up 8 points just since March. Clearly, the tariff announcement, the chaos around that is having a negative impression with voters.
David, at this point, I mean, this has been the kind of thing that has held Donald Trump up throughout his political career, right? What was going on in his first term, that has really changed here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And take a look when we ask, you know, it's all about how you feel about your personal financial situation that politicians sort of respond to and look at. So feelings on personal financial situation, it's a little more evenly split here. 47% satisfied, 52% dissatisfied. We also asked that question over time. And take a look here, Casey. That 47% now, though, that has gone in the wrong direction from where it was in March. In March, it was 50% who said that they were satisfied with their personal financial situation. How have Trump's policies affected local cost of living? 6 in 10 Americans say it has increased local cost of living. He said he would lower prices on day one. And then if you look here we asked sort of, what is your family's top economic problem? Inflation at 28%, food costs at 16%. This is the stuff that he promised on day one would change after he was elected. That's a troubling sign that that's still the top concern for people about their family's economic condition.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, one of the things that, of course, Joe Biden learned the hard way is that the economy can actually be okay, but how people feel about the economy is actually what matters at the end of the day. How are people feeling about the Trump economy?
Not great. In fact, the plurality, 37%, are downright afraid. 29% pessimistic. Add that up, that's 66%. 2/3 of Americans say they are either pessimistic or afraid. And then their predictive sensibility is a recession likely in the next year. 7 in 10 Americans in our poll say yes.
That's really, that previous slide too, 4% of people say that they are enthusiastic about the economy.
That's it.
I mean, that's like basically zero. That's really remarkable. So we also, I think, looked at tariffs and exactly how people are feeling about that, because that, of course, seems to be the thing that, that rollout did not go the way the White House would have liked.
But it is also the big economic bet that Donald Trump is making from a policy perspective. And that is what's concerning here. 28% called the tariffs good policy. 55% call it bad policy. Does Trump have a clear strategy on tariffs, Casey? 58%, nearly 6 in 10, say no. He does not have a clear strategy. Only 42% says that he does have a clear strategy. How will Trump's tariff policies affect the U.S. economy? This, I think, is really interesting. 72% say in the short term it's going to hurt. 53% say that in the long term it's going to hurt. That shows a little bit the success of the Trump messaging, short-term pain for long-term gain. That is resonating for some people, but yet still a majority of Americans say that the tariffs will hurt, Casey.
All right, David Chalian for us. Thank you very much for bringing us those brand new numbers here at the top of 4. We really appreciate it. And our panel joins us now, CNN political commentator, Republican strategist Kristen Soltis Anderson, the host of the Chuck Toddcast, Chuck Todd, CNN political commentator Ashley Allison, and CNN political commentator Scott Jennings. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Chuck Todd, this picture is not pretty for the president. I guess it makes sense that he's railing against all of the polls on his Truth Social platform. He's basically trying to discredit it. But I mean, this is some proof. We're getting this data about what we've seen in the last month. We don't have the big economic numbers yet, GDP, the jobs, et cetera. What do you make of all this?
Well, it's remarkable because it's in his first 100 days, how quickly this has now gone backwards for him on the economy. And I think part of the problem is he won swing voters because of the economy. So in some ways, this is how he's going to get graded by the public, particularly those, not the hard partisans. I think the hard partisans are going to grade him in different ways, but on the soft partisans, and that's what you're seeing, the real movement here. It's among independents and the soft partisans, and they're very economically sensitive. And I go back, look, this tariff, what he did with the tariff announcement is he took ownership of this economy arguably before he had to. I'm old enough to remember when Barack Obama was blaming George W. Bush for the economy for 2 years, and he kind of got away with it. George W. Bush was able to sort of say, hey, I inherited a recession from Bill Clinton type of thing. You kind of want to own, and he instead, the tariff announcement, and that's why I've described it kind of like what Afghanistan did to Biden. That was his best subject as far as voters were concerned. And you messed up that, and this is with Trump, this is his best subject, and you messed up this. This is why I think it's been so catastrophic to him politically.
Yeah. Kristen, you're our pollster at the table. What are you taking in as most significant from this new data?
Well, if you look at under the hood, Donald Trump's own voters and Republicans still seem to like what he's doing. But
Exactly.
If you are trying to figure out how do I sift through all these numbers, I always find it instructive. Do independents look more like Republicans or like Democrats under the hood? And unfortunately for Donald Trump in this poll, the independents look a lot more like Democrats on the question of, has Donald Trump's policy improved U.S. economic conditions? Republicans, 63% say yes. But for everybody else, independents, it's only 17%. Democrats, it's only 3%. We know that's going to be low. But that's where I think the real issue is. The second problem is on intensity. You were talking about enthusiasm, optimism. When you look at Republicans, only 7% of Republicans say they're enthusiastic about what Trump's doing on the economy. They're looking to their president, who they voted for, and saying, I'm going to need you to tell me a little bit more about where this is going.
Well, they're still looking. I mean, we've had an organ transplant in the Republican Party. The new organ is tariffs. This has not been part of the body Republican. And so Republicans, I think, are still.
How are you taking it? How is it?
I mean, we'll see because I think what's on deck here and what will help reverse this trend in the polling, trade deals, announcements are good, peace deals, less chaos is good, tax deals, lower taxes is good, budget deals, looking like the Republicans are a competent governing party. So it's time for let's make a deal. And that will, I think, help people see the future, see the trajectory changing from something that they're nervous about to something where they can see. And we had a question about, does he have a clear plan? That would tell you, yes, they have a clear plan because it looks like they're announcing deal after deal after deal. That's what they have to do next. That's what will reverse it.
If these numbers were anything different, I would be worried about the American people. We have been on this stage multiple days. Oh my gosh, my 401k this day, the stock market. Of course, people are not going to like what Donald Trump is doing right now. To Chuck's point, yes, this was his blue chip issue, right? That he's supposed to be the economy guy, and people are scared to death. They can't afford things. Their 401ks are going down. They don't know what the plan is. Tell me a little bit more, but instead it's just, oh, polls don't matter. I would be surprised if the numbers were any better. Now, first week I heard a lot, oh, it's just his first week. Oh, now we're on the eve of 100 days. If this administration does not change course, maybe not on the policy, I think the policy is bad, and many economists think it's bad too, but if they do not start explaining to the American people how to get on the other side of this nervousness and anxiety, I bet you those frontliner Republicans will start to distance themselves from Donald Trump too, because these are not numbers that you can win in a midterm.
I just don't think Republicans running are going to be able to do that. I mean, Trump is such a dominant force in the
Then
party
they might lose.
and in politics, but that's why they have a job to do. They have to cut taxes. They have to make the tax cuts permanent. This reconciliation process is going to give every Republican a chance to vote for several things that you can take home and say, we're doing our part. We're knocking taxes down. We're unleashing American energy. We're doing our part up on the Hill to help the president be successful. Because I just don't think divorcing yourself from the president is a possibility.
You're 100% right on that. But this is where I think there was some political incompetence here, meaning they should have started with tax cuts and done tariffs down the road. If you're supposed to release the spirit animals of this economy, then don't get in the way. You know, they could have started, you sort of start with the goodies. They could have started with the tax cut. Frankly, been a lot easier to get Congress going. And then, now I know they want to use the tariffs to kind of help come up with the math to pay for it, but I think in hindsight, this tax cut is now going to get harder to get through Congress. Would have been easier if this is the first.
I think the reason why he went so fast is Johnson going to be able to keep his conference together? I mean,
yes. Magic Mike has pulled so many rabbits out of so many hats.
Well, Speaker Trump helps.
I have.
Don't forget the speaker. Don't forget the other speaker of the House.
Look, time and again, you've asked this question 100 times on TV, and every time, what does Mike Johnson do? He and Trump find a way. They're going to find a way.
Well, Trump finds a way.
They have to find a way. They have to.
Nobody cares who finds a way.
Failure is not an option. You're right. It's sort of like it's all too big to fail because the margins are so small.
Who cares? As long as this is passed in Congress, which is low taxes, Americans are going to benefit from low taxes. I mean, that's not rocket science. But they're going to say anything bad when it comes to Trump. Nobody really wants to do the facts.
Administration is approaching its first 100-day mark with a full court press on the issue of illegal immigration, and they really don't want you to miss it. So they subtly and tastefully deck the White House North Lawn with dozens of yard signs featuring photos of people that the Trump administration claims are in the country illegally, each poster saying arrested and listing the alleged offensive with which they have been charged. CNN's working to confirm the identities and if there are actual allegations against these people. Until then, we are blurring their identities. That display was put up after the Trump administration announced nearly 800 arrests of undocumented immigrants and a massive crackdown in Florida over the weekend, even though immigration has historically been one of President Trump's more popular issues, given he outperformed his first term high by 7 points earlier this year. Something appears to be changing. A brand new CNN poll released yesterday shows declining approval ratings for President Trump's handling of this issue of immigration. Overall, 45% approved now. That's down 6 points from March. 53% are expressing confidence in the president's ability to deal with immigration. That's still a majority, but it is down from 60% in December. 47% of the American people say they have no confidence in the president's handling of this issue.
Obviously, the president has signed over 200 executive orders and immigrations in as nearly 100 days in office, and a lot of them have focused on immigration, some in ways that are directly impactful, including the ones that you saw Trump sign on his first several days in office. Today, they a lot of times also have to do just with messaging, and including the one that he's expected to sign here shortly, Jake, inside the Oval Office. Right now, we haven't gotten an indication that's going to open to reporters, but we are told that it's going to relate to publishing a list of all the sanctuary cities in the United States, for example, as the White House is really trying to keep immigration at the forefront of their agenda and also highlighting what they have done on immigration, because that was one of his key campaign promises, Jake. And yes, you've seen the border crossings go down significantly. When you look at the numbers from January and then February, March, and since the president has been in the Oval Office, you've seen just how dramatically those numbers have dropped. And so the White House is trying to keep the focus on that. That's why the signs are behind me here at the White House focusing on that, because they do know typically it's one of his strongest areas that he polls in with voters. And they saw him coming into the White House arguing it was a mandate to secure the border. They've been facing way more scrutiny lately, Jake, though, of course, over some of the cases when it comes to who they are deporting and whether or not those people are being afforded due process as a part of those deportations from the United States, and also whether or not they're abiding by court rulings. They were just pressed this morning about a little girl who is a U.S. citizen who was deported along with her mother, who is undocumented. And you saw Tom Homan, the president's border czar, arguing that was a parental issue. He kept pointing to the mother. That is something he's done previously when we've asked, well, what happens when a child who's in a mixed status household, one of their parents is deported? And they have often pointed back to just parenting in that case, Jake. And so certainly it is something that the White House is trying to highlight. But as you noted, those CNN poll numbers, the president's handling of immigration is down 6 points since March, as they have continued to face a lot of court scrutiny over this matter.
All right, Caitlin Collins, thanks so much.
Kristen Soltis Anderson, I mean, one of the things that has become sort of a feature of covering this administration.
Thank you for tuning in to the live show. What do you guys think about Trump's first 100 days? What do you guys think about it? I think so far he's done okay. He's done great, really, because what he inherited was absolute BS. From the border to the economy to the prices to inflation, to interest rate and all of that stuff. And he's working hard now to kind of like bring America back, as well as end the war between Ukraine and Russia. Of course, that's a dirty war, and that is affecting the economy worldwide, because Russia plays a big role when it comes to oil worldwide, and Ukraine plays a big role too when it comes to grains. So once that war ends, or some sort of peace happens in that region, that is going to be, a win for Earth, for the whole world, but most importantly, the United States. So that would be Trump's biggest win if he eventually does that, which is if he ends the war, if he could find a solution between Russia and Ukraine, then this 4 years would be great, absolute great. But so far, he's done great with the border for sure. He's figured out how to root out and point out the scams, the fraud, the wasteful spending in the government, which that's what DOGE was for, Department of Government Efficiency. So with that being said, let's keep going.
Is that when there are stories that are very negative for them, like the economy, they really want to change the subject to immigration, right? And you saw them kind of take this and, they sent Caroline Leavitt and Tom Homan out to do a briefing far earlier in the day than these briefings are normally held, right? It was at 8:30 this morning. But in this case, I'm just really interested to know if you think, considering the data you see, that there is a point where Americans would turn on Trump over. There have been other instances where people will say that for this administration, the cruelty is the point of it. There's been some of that around DOGE and the federal government. They want to do this. Is there any sort of potential for backlash here. I mean, these kids are U.S. citizens. One of them had cancer. And then there's also this detail that the father of one of them filed a petition, an emergency petition, to say that he wanted the kid to stay. So there was apparently a dispute between the mother, who the government says wanted to take the child back to Honduras, but the father, who's here, did not. These are really sticky situations.
These are tough questions, but ultimately voters voted for Donald Trump to do a couple things: lower cost of living, secure the border, get immigration under control. We're always top of that list. And so he gets a very long leash from voters, especially from his own base, on this issue. And I think you've had a couple of instances where stories have popped up and they have been outrageous. The headlines really, grab your attention. And then slowly but surely other details come out that kind of paint a very slightly different picture. Oh, this person may have had this record, etc. In this case, it's horrifying to think of, what that 2-year-old or what that 4-year-old must be thinking. At the same time, Donald Trump's own base, I have not seen any sign of atrophy in terms of his voters' support for him on this issue, because they believe our immigration system was so broken before that even if there are going to be these headlines, for them, just getting the system fixed and addressing illegal immigration is worth it.
Should we be deporting these kids, Scott?
Well, I think we should keep the families together. I think Homan is right about that. And I think he's also right that if they weren't, people will be howling about it. I don't think Republicans believe that we should let the perfect be the enemy of the good when it comes to controlling what was a massive crisis created by the last administration. There are always going to be individual stories, but the overall program is pretty clear. Deport people who came here illegally, especially violent criminals, get the border closed, which they have effectively done, and you deal with the individual situations along the way. And you have to keep one thing in mind. Whenever you make exceptions, whenever you say, well, in this case, we'll give you some dispensation, the message then to everyone else is clear. Just get here and maybe you'll find a way to stay. That's what everyone else has done. They're not communicating that.
Are these people, though, I mean, the White House has also today put up pictures of people on the White House lawn with the crimes underneath them. I don't think there's any, the Christian State is very clear on that, right? So here's what it looks like, right? Americans overwhelmingly say they want these people removed from the country. But these are mothers. Now, to my knowledge, there are no details of criminal allegations, aside from, of course, coming to the country. But there were rules where you could come and claim asylum, right? They're showing up at their hearings. They haven't disappeared into the country, and they have these little kids who are U.S. citizens.
Yeah, I mean, the policy question is, how many exceptions do you want to make? And the Trump administration and President Trump has always said, we're really not going to make any exceptions. And that's, as Kristen just said, that's what the American people voted for. Exception after exception after exception got us into the mess in the first place.
I don't agree with the policy, but I don't disagree with your assessment of this. Elections have consequences. Now, when Donald Trump said that he was going to deport criminals and the violent folks, I don't think when a lot of Americans voted, they wanted the mom and the kid deported. But it is very clear now to the American people that there are no exceptions that this administration wants. They want all immigrants gone that have come here without papers.
Okay, she was going to bring it down. I thought she was, okay, let's give her the benefit of the doubt. Here we go.
Now to the American people that there are no exceptions that this administration wants. They want all immigrants gone that have come here without papers. Now, this will come back in the midterms. This will come back in the next election.
Without papers is different from coming here illegally, okay? I mean, coming here without papers, what does that actually mean? But she doesn't want to use the word illegally, because once you say coming into the United States illegally, it's like, okay, you're going to have to go back. But she's saying without papers, which is more subtle than illegally. Yeah, I see what she's doing.
This is an opportunity. I hate to talk about this because these are real people's lives, but this is an opportunity for Democrats. In the first Trump administration, the one time the issue of immigration actually started trending to become a more positive issue that broke through was during family separation. It was the one time in the years about this issue. If this becomes a family separation 2.0 where you see American citizens being deported, that one story could make it the break. The question is, will Democrats be able to take it and use it for their advantage?
Use what? There's nothing to use. Girl, there's nothing to use. I'm telling you. All right, here we go. The polls.
CNN poll released just moments ago shows There are some warning signs for the administration. When asked how Trump's economic policies have affected the U.S. economic conditions, 59% of the American public says they have worsened conditions. 27% say they have improved conditions. 14% say they've had no effect. CNN's Elena Trine is live for us outside the White House. Elena?
Well, Jake, look, I mean, these are pretty dismal numbers for the president, particularly on an issue that he had once promised would be, ushering the new golden age, particularly this economic revolution that hadn't been seen before. We are learning now that Americans are very much unhappy with the economy overall. They are worried about inflation, about prices at the pump, with grocery prices, but also the president's tariff policy. And that's really, I think, one of the key questions that we're still trying to figure out is what exactly or when exactly are we going to see these trade deals that they've promised come into fruition. Now, tomorrow morning, we're going to hear from Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary. He's really been the one leading a lot of the messaging on this tariff policy. And one of the things he said today is that he believes that there could be a deal soon when it comes to a tariff trade deal with India. He said that could come as early as this week, if not next week. But again, what we are hearing from this administration is not really doing enough to quell the concerns of many of these Americans. Just for one example, 6 in 10 Americans are saying that the president's policies have increased the cost of living in their communities. Only 12% say his agenda is helping bring prices down. Now, one of the most striking things I think about this term that is so different from his first term is that the president has said this publicly, but I know he's saying it behind closed doors in my conversations with White House officials, that he's willing to have there be some short-term pain, that they are willing to have Americans, go through this for now, because he genuinely believes that overall in the long run that they are going to have see this economic policy kind of even out the economy. But again, we're 100 days in now, and we haven't really seen that from this White House. And one of the other things as well that I'm picking up on is in my conversations with top Trump administration officials, they are arguing that they also recognize they have a very short time frame for how they want to and when they want to push these policies through. They recognize that after this 100 days, some of the leeway that the president was granted may not continue to kind of survive, particularly when you think about Republicans on Capitol Hill and those worried about the midterm elections. But they also recognize they have a race to the midterms, and the economy is going to be one of the key issues that they really need to sort out by them. All of this kind of weighing on this 100 days.
All right,
Jake.
Elena Trine at the White House for us. Thanks so much. Let's take an economic reality check and turn to CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich. Vanessa, President Trump's approval on the economy is not in a good place. How is the actual economy doing away from the polls?
Well, if we look at the data, the economy is actually in a solid position. Just look at inflation. Inflation in March came in at 2.4%. That is a significant difference from what we saw last year in March. It was at 3.5%. But of course, this sort of last drag to get inflation down to 2% has been very daunting for the Federal Reserve. And that is why people feel like prices are just still too high. But let's look at prices at the gas pump. Today, the price of gas was $3.14 a gallon, is $3.14 a gallon, compared to last year, down more than 50 cents. And let's look at jobs, where the labor market is right now. 228,000 jobs were added in March. If you look at that over the last year on that bar chart there, you can see that that is above average, Jake. But the big but here is that all of this data is backwards looking at March. So while we were on solid footing in March, April's data could look different because, of course, Jake, that is when the president imposed those higher tariffs.
You just heard of the polling. 59% of the American people in CNN's poll say Trump's policies have made the economy worse. Why do you think they think that?
Well, let's look at consumer confidence and consumer sentiment. These are two key indicators that sort of also take a temperature of how people are feeling. Consumer confidence fell by 7.2 points. That's looking at March. And essentially, this report said that consumers' expectations were especially gloomy with pessimism about future business conditions, deepening, and confidence about future employment prospects falling to a 12-year low. Also, let's look at consumer sentiment, which picked up April's trends about how people were feeling. Consumer sentiment fell by 8.4%. But again, about the future mostly, year-ahead inflation expectations surged from 5% last month to 6.5% this month. That was the highest reading since 1981 and marking 4 consecutive months of unusually large increases of 0.5 percentage points or more. So people in these reports indicating that they are very nervous about the future. And of course, how you feel right now can also determine how you feel about the future, Jake.
And speaking of that, consumers have been bracing for the impact of these tariffs. Economists predicting higher prices, emptier shelves. When can we actually expect to see the impact of the tariffs?
Well, when a cargo ship leaves China, if they're leaving today, for example, it'll take about 3 to 6 weeks, depending on which port it's going into, the Port of Los Angeles or the Port of New York, for that cargo to reach the U.S. And then from there, businesses will have to decide, are they going to pass those prices down to the consumer? The Port of Los Angeles sees the most cargo coming in from China. And here's what the port director said as he was giving an update on where things stand. He said, we also see the inventory on shelves and procurement facilities will shrink. Many major retailers have told us they have about 6 to 8 weeks of supply inventory in their systems now, and it will quickly dry up. United States manufacturers and consumers alike will find difficult decisions in the weeks and months to come if policies don't change. So I think what's interesting about all of this, Jake, is people feeling pretty terrible about the economy right now. But Jake, ultimately, the worst is to come on these price hikes, Jake.
Yeah, that's the old Sinatra song, The Worst Is Yet to Come.
Yeah.
Right? Vanessa
got it.
Yurkevich, thanks so much. Let's turn to the panel, discuss this and more. Shermichael, let's start with this polling, because when you know President Trump's on Truth Social attacking Fox News polling, then you know it's not good. The economy is a major reason Trump is back in the White House. It might even be the main reason. Take a look at this shift in just 1 month. In March, 40% approved of Trump on the economy, 56% disapproved. A month later, 61% disapprove, only 39% approved. Do I have that right? Approve that right? Anyway, so the numbers are going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
What do they need to do to fix it?
The president's numbers have obviously slid backwards. I'm certainly certain that he's aware of it. The political shop in the White House, they're also aware, and I think it's why the White House is working really diligently to bring home and move forward with various deals with countries across the globe as it pertains to tariffs. The president just announced a couple of days ago that he's really hopeful that China will come to the table with some type of agreement as it pertains to protecting intellectual property, which I think would be a big win for the administration. It's also fascinating when you look at some of the polls, because the Washington Post ABC poll suggested that while the president's numbers have receded a little bit, the American people writ large, for the most part, still trust the president more to manage the affairs of the country than they do Democrats. And I think that's a very important number to take a look at. Also, the New York Times poll, I looked through the data there. I'm a bit skeptical. Only 34% of respondents, I believe, were Republicans who actually voted for the president. Not to get into the weeds from the viewer's perspective,
Right.
but that stuff really matters as a strategist when I'm analyzing data, trying to figure out the accuracy of said data and if it's truly representative of what most Americans feel. So overall, Jake, I would say focus on the economy, try to get some of those deals done as quickly as you possibly can. The American people, I believe, are willing to give the president an opportunity.
Sochi, The Atlantic just published a wide-ranging interview with President Trump. I want to share the part that focuses on the economy. Quote, Trump pushed back on the notion, popular among some Wall Street analysts, that financial turmoil would cause him to roll back his tariff policies. And then President Trump says, it always affects you a little bit, he said, but there's no red line, no, quote, certain number at which he would feel compelled to change course.
Well, I already see the White House scrambling internally, figuring out how to change course, because they obviously see the poll numbers. It's not just CNN, but it's across the board. The American people are not happy with what he is doing. I think that the White House early on started talking about Americans are going to feel the short-term pain. You've heard it from the White House over the last 100 days. The reality, though, is that the American people are not okay with that short-term gain. Jake, you're right. One of the reasons, and the largest reason, that Trump won is because he said he could bring down prices. And
Exactly. But what do you expect him to do? Do it on day one? Bring down prices on day one? We had 4 years of Sleepy Joe. We've had 4 years of high gas prices, high food prices, high inflation, high interest rate. We had 4 years of all of this stuff. The border was, yeah, nobody has to tell you about the border. You know what happened to Laken Riley. You know what happened in New York when a lady was set ablaze in the subway by an illegal migrant. You know what happened in Springfield. So Like, they may be saying what they're talking about. I get it, you know. However, Americans know what they have faced for the past 4 years. They have faced incredible hardship for past 4 years. So this is his first 100 days, and we are already complaining about, well, he said it was going to bring prices down on day one. It's not going to happen on day one. He may have said it, of course. Elections, you say stuff to win elections. However, is he working towards it? Absolutely. Has he secured the border? The border crossing has gone down. Like, this is the most secured border we've ever had. Close this, Google. This is the most secure border we've ever had. He's currently negotiating with so many countries, about 90 countries. Of course, China is his main goal. However, he's working diligently trying to find a deal. Nobody had the balls to renegotiate trade deals. So, can we be patient? You just had a president that was falling off stairs, that was walking into the Amazon rainforest, that was sleeping on the world stage. And we want to complain about Trump's first 100 days? I don't think so.
Americans are desperate for the president to bring down prices, and this is why Democrats lost. And I think that while you were mentioning polling about how people are trusting Republicans over Democrats right now, the reality is Republicans control everything at the moment. And so, you know, they are going to get blamed if they are not bringing down prices. And I think that he has to change course more aggressively and showing the American people that he's doing more to bring down prices if they're going to win in the midterm elections.
But the economy has shown itself to be very resolute and strong. We continue to create more jobs. Unemployment numbers are still particularly low. I mean, look at unemployment numbers for communities of color, pretty low. Unemployment numbers for younger Americans, incredibly low. And so if we can just get through this moment, which I believe the administration, Jake, is really, really focused on, but I think for the most part, Sochi, we will see a recovery. We won't get to the point, I believe, 6 to 8 weeks where that director of the port was saying we only have so much time before companies say we're running out of products. I think we can avoid that.
We better avoid that. All right, Amazon is going back and forth with the White House.
One of the strongest takeaways was Amazon making a business decision that it was going to be transparent and show the cost of the tariff as an increase to any of the prices that are going up on its site. And Caroline said she had just spoken to the president and that the president and her, this is coming from the White House, that this decision by Amazon was a hostile and political act. We know that the president and Jeff Bezos have become closer.
They're going to show the prices on the
But I do think
website.
business people are making business decisions, and this 100 days is most important on the economy. Madeline Rivera has been at the White House for us, and she has more as we check in with her this morning. Hi, Maddie.
Hi, guys. Hi, good morning, Bill and Dana. So the administration is looking to reshape its message on the economy, and it comes as polls show a majority of voters still remain gloomy about the issue. But you hear Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying in the briefing today that their economic initiatives will take time, especially when it comes to tariffs, trade, tax, and deregulation. Nevertheless, the White House is out with a new memo this morning mentioning what they say are their wins, and that includes prices dropping. It includes a rise in jobs in the private sector and private investment. Here's what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had to say this morning. Let's listen.
At this point, President Trump has secured more investments in the United States of America in 100 days than Joe Biden did in 4 years. President Trump is America's businessman in chief, and that's why these trillions of dollars in investments are flooding to our country.
And tariffs, of course, is the other main topic. Bessent answered some of those questions in this briefing this morning, and some quick highlights. He repeated the tariffs on China are not sustainable. It's also unclear at this point if the president has spoken to Chinese President Xi Jinping about tariffs. Bessent didn't give quite a definitive answer on that. It appears, though, the administration is getting ready to soften some of the tariffs on cars. The Wall Street Journal reports that 25% tariffs on foreign-made cars and parts will remain in effect, but the automakers won't have to pay other duties duties like those on steel and aluminum. And they'll also be reimbursed for some of the tariffs on imported auto parts. That levy is supposed to take effect on Saturday. A senior administration official says they are doing this because the administration has made good faith efforts to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says this deal is a major victory for the president's trade policy by rewarding companies who manufacture domestically while providing runway to manufacturers who have expressed their commitment to invest in America and expand their domestic manufacturing. Speaking about those polls, 38% of voters rather approve the way the president has handled the issue. 33% approve of his moves on tariffs. 59% disapprove. And today, the president will be heading to Michigan. We expect him to talk more about those car tariffs when he heads to that visit. Bill and Dana, back to you.
Maddie, thank you so much. Great to have you wrap that up for us.
I want to bring in Maria B. for the top headline for her this morning. Good morning to you.
How are you?
I'm great, thank you, and thanks for being here. A couple things from our Fox polling about a week ago. The soft numbers for the first 100 days were all based on the economy across the board. Here, call for one. Here, however, it's a sign of good news, right? It's inflation. It's lowering. In December, is at 3%. You're down at 2.4% for the month of March. We've been listening now for the half hour plus. What's your takeaway, Maria?
Look, Bill and Dana, I think there's no other way to look at this first 100 days other than a huge success. I mean, I know what you're talking about in terms of the polling and the approval rating, but look at the president's two top issues: immigration and inflation. Border crossings are down 99%. I spoke with President Trump on Sunday. He told me 3 people were apprehended at the border in the month of April, compared with 248,000 in the month last year, 1 year ago. That's the migration and immigration story. Now let's take a look at inflation. You and I talked about eggs a long time ago. The price of eggs are down 50%. Look at where mortgage rates are down. Look at oil prices are down. So when you take a look at what President Trump said that he was going to do, it is a huge success in terms of these first 100 days. Has it been volatile in terms of the stock market's reaction? Absolutely. Markets are down since Inauguration Day. And that's because we've had a lot of uncertainty. When I interviewed President Trump last month, the one issue that I focused on was clarity. I said, Mr. President, business needs clarity. They have to talk to shareholders. They have to make their investment plans for the year ahead. They need clarity. He said, well, tariffs may go up. They may go up. They're not going to go down. I said to him, that's not clarity. That issue is front and center and has been front and center ever since. It's about clarity. The business community, the stock market, investors, they all want specifics. They can't have specifics yet because they're in the middle of this. We're in it. They're talking. You just heard Scott Bessent. He said they're talking to 18 important trading relationships, 17 of which are right now front and center. So we will get specifics on these deals. It sounded from that press conference that we're going to get a deal on India very soon. South Korea, Japan, soon after. But look, when you're taking a look at the next 100 days, and that comes, in August, it's about the Senate. It's about the tax extensions. The president will go to Saudi Arabia. By the way, talking about foreigners, $5 trillion in new money, investment from governments as well as corporations invested in America since President Trump was inaugurated. These are huge numbers. So you can talk about all of the criticism from the Democrats sitting on the steps of the Capitol all day long. You can talk about the volatility in the stock market, but one has to go back to the actual promises made and the promises kept and what this has meant for the American people.
What did you think of the Amazon decision on the tariff in terms of clarity? And Caroline Leavitt saying that the president sees it as a hostile and political act to say that the price increases that they are facing would be due to the tariffs.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's hostile or not. I will say that there was no mention whatsoever at Amazon about Joe Biden's inflation. And the fact is that we got to 40-year highs. Inflation measured by the Consumer Price Index was up 9.1%. We all remember we were at the cash register. Everything cost so much more. So, why they're putting a little bug now, this is because of the tariffs, and they didn't put a little bug, this is because of the $7 trillion spent by the Democrats under Joe Biden is a question.
Yeah.
I think Ed Lawrence, we were both sitting here, we thought he nailed the question. He said, how long do you think the runway is, basically to paraphrase? How long is the runway before it really has an economic impact on the tariff situation? And Besson said a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a month or if that's 2 to 4 weeks from now. But if they can get a major headline and nail it down, that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
It would have been, I know that they wanted to do that today. But the USMCA with Mexico, Canada, and the U.S., from the moment it was announced to the moment it was signed and implemented, took 2 years.
Yeah. Well, look, companies are responding. I mean, today on Mornings with Maria, I had on the CEO of Merck. Merck is the pharmaceutical giant behind so many important cancer drugs like Keytruda. They are breaking ground today on a new facility in Wilmington, Delaware, to produce drugs in America. So, you know, they produce lots of that cancer drug right now in Ireland. They're going to move a lot of that production here.
That's that supply chain.
But, you know, you just mentioned the uncertainty. I mean, the automakers have withdrawn their guidance. I was supposed to speak today with the CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra. She's moved it to Thursday, so we'll have her on Thursday because these auto parts tariffs are important. The president is expected to make an important move and actually ease off on some of those auto tariffs. But what did GM do today when they reported a very good quarter in earnings? They said, disregard the guidance for 2025 that we gave you already. We're going to come out with new guidance after we hear from President
Trump. Back to
Trump.
your point about clarity.
Correct.
Okay, so it's looking like there will be some sort of relief from this tariffs for autos and some shipment, hopefully, because tariff is definitely affecting a lot of small businesses, even huge conglomerate businesses. So hopefully this kind of resides down. All right, border crossing. Here we go. Tom Holman.
Who's the border czar? And has been working all elements of trying to secure our borders and collect the millions that got here over the last 4 years. And he's my guest. Tom, great to see you. Today's your day. You opened up at 8:30 this morning with a press conference. Day one, 100 days in. Your thoughts?
Well, it's a great day celebrating the success of President Trump and the men and women of the United States Border Patrol, right? As you said, border crossing is down 96, 97, 99%, depending on what week you look at. But we have the most secure border in the history of this nation right now.
Right.
President Trump was able to accomplish in 7 weeks what Joe Biden couldn't or wouldn't do in 4 years.
Wouldn't. You believe that it was intentional?
Absolutely. I mean, he's the first president in the history of the nation who came into office and unsecured the border on purpose. He said he's going to end ICE detention. He's going to put a moratorium on deportation. He's going to give free health care to illegal aliens. He's going to have amnesty and DACA. You make those type of promises to the whole world, that's not an accident. The most people in the entire world would come and take advantage of that giveaway.
So if you look at the Marines on the Mexican southern border, you look at the military on our southern border, when you look at the elimination of catch and release and the CBP app, out of all those elements, what's the most important? What is the most to stop the flow? Because we used to have an overwhelming population in the remain of Mexico, right? They were stopped, they had to stay there. That doesn't exist today. Why is that?
No catch and release. You're not getting released in the country. You can come to our border, but you're going to be returned.
So they don't try.
They don't try because, the last administration, they knew if you cross the border illegally, you'd be processed within 24 hours and flown to the city of their choice. That ended. When you come to our border, you're not going to be allowed to enter the country. Like under President Trump, since day one, we've had 9 people released, as I talked about this morning. 4 were material witnesses. We needed them in a criminal investigation. 4 were significant medical issues. The other one was a humanitarian case. We ended catch release. People know that we're enforcing laws, and there's no way you're going to get in this country by crossing the border illegally.
Educate me on this. Obama, they said, sent out 200, 300,000, got deported. Those 300,000 did not get hearings. So why are you supposed to be giving hearings to these people? I don't get it. Like, when we round people up, they're supposed to get their due process. It's not possible, is it?
These same people are demanding all these extra hearings, due process. Where were they when you had 10.5 million people come to our borders, released millions of the country under violating the statute of parole and asylum? I mean, where were they when you got a 600% increase in sex trafficking? Where were they when 250,000 Americans died from fentanyl on an open border? Where were they, where no inspected terrorist record numbers coming across the border? They didn't follow the legal process to get here. Now all of a sudden they demand a legal process to deport them. They didn't care there was no vetting done to get here, but now they want vetting done, each and every one being removed. We're enforcing laws of this country, and we're following the statutes in federal law. Alien Enemies Act is an act that was written by Congress, enacted by Congress. We're using every tool in our tool shed to make this country safe again, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
How long do you need the military at the border, knowing that there's a budget to be aware of?
We need them there. We need them there now. And look, yesterday, like I said, we only had 33 gotaways. That number needs to get to 0. But if we pull back now.
Yesterday at 33?
Last 24 hours, 33 gotaways. Wow. Down from 1,800.
How do you know they're gotaways? Do you catch them on video and you can't stop them?
On video, drone traffic, or sensor traffic. And but going from 1,800 on average a day to 33 is pretty good. 33 too many. But I think you look at the number of people released. Like I said, we released 9. At the same time period, we released 9. Joe Biden released 184,000. But we need the military on the border. Like Pete Hegseth said, who I love Pete. He said a great thing by saying they defended borders all over the world. Now they're defending our border. I think they're where they should be.
So who decides who gets on that plane and gets flown out to El Salvador or other people? What goes into that? Do you play a role in that?
I play an oversight role, but ICE really depends. They create the manifest. They work very closely with DOJ and Department of State. And that's what's good. I sent these many people so there's no due process. No due process. We spend hundreds of hours on every illegal alien to ascertain, to ensure they're a member of TDA MS-13. A lot of due process, hundreds of hours. So we got the Department of Justice at the table. We got the Department of State at the table. We got DOD at the table. Every day we meet. There's a lot of due process to make sure that everybody we remove is a public safety threat or national security.
So we got this morning. It came out in the Wall Street Journal. Trump to sign order requiring nationwide list of sanctuary cities and states. How does that help you?
Sanctuary is a sanctuary for criminals. When you knowingly release an illegal alien public safety threat back in the community, it makes it more dangerous for the community, of course, makes it more dangerous for our officers, and makes it more dangerous for the illegal alien. We want to take possession of the public safety threat inside a jail, where they choose to lock somebody in a jail cell. Give us access in the jail. It's much more efficient.
But what is making a list of having them, just to be able to call them out? And
we're going after all of them.
Okay.
Sanctuaries are sanctuary criminals, and we think they're violating federal law. I mean, every elected mayor, governor, and city council person, you think they all want public safety threats
you would think
in the
so.
community.
Great. Tom Homan had a great 100 days. How after 4 years? What's this border going to look like after 4 years? It's going to be great. Tom Homan.
It's already right now looking great. From the stats and the numbers, you can tell border crossing is all the way down. Trump's first 100 days, he's already gotten the border secured. So the next thing to focus on right now is the economy. Inflation is already down. Okay. So in the war between Russia and Ukraine, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. End the war between Russia and Ukraine. And then that is definitely going to help oil prices, as well as get the trade deal with China signed. Okay. Americans need it ASAP, so this tariff is not going to keep dragging out. And also, they need to pass the budget. Okay, they need to pass the bill, rather, that would cut the taxes permanently for all Americans. And that would, he's already won if he could do all of these things that I just mentioned. All right, here we go. Prime Minister for Canada,
As I've been warning for months,
has been projected to be Mark Carney. Everybody knows he's a liberal. Poilievre definitely did not win. He would have been like the conservative, but now Mark Carney is projected to be the Prime Minister of Canada. And most people are saying, well, Canada is going to get what they've always been wishing for, which is a liberal, well, the former prime minister, before he resigned or stepped down, he was a liberal as well. Well, Mark Carney, who, with my research, he is absolutely connected in the EU. And this is going to be maybe some sort of bad news, not so good news for Trump, because this guy's definitely going to be a pain in the air for Trump, 1,000%.
America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen. We are once again at one of those hinge moments of history. Our old relationship with the United States, a relationship based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The system of open global trade, anchored by the United States, a system that Canada has relied on since the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped deliver prosperity for a country for decades, is over. These are tragedies, but it's also our new reality. We are over the shock of the American betrayal, but we should never forget the lessons.
But you're going to take us forward.
We have to look out for ourselves, and above all, we have to take care of each other. And my message to every Canadian is this: no matter where you live, no matter what language you speak, no matter how you voted, I will always do my best to represent everyone who calls Canada home.
This is the same guy, Mark Carney, who said that for Canada to move forward, they have to get to zero net emissions, which is there would be no fossil fuel. So you would need electric cars all through Canada. That's what he stands for. So you may not even have heat when it comes to winter. I mean, I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. Mark Carney, here we go.
Breaking overnight this stunning political comeback thanks to and at the expense of President Trump. Canada's Liberal Party, led by Prime Minister Mark Carney, declared victory overnight despite being really left for dead several months ago. But then Donald Trump took office, targeted Canada with tariffs, and threatened to annex it as the 51st state.
America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country.
But Canada is being subsidized by the United States. So when he's talking about, well, America wants our land, our water, whatever, bro, you need America.
Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen.
That was the main campaign issue, and this is what Donald Trump has said about Canada over the last several months.
And we can't let them take advantage of the U.S. What I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state. Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S. If we make it in the United States, we don't need it to be made in Canada. We'll have the jobs. That's why Canada should be our 51st state. So when I say they should be a state, I mean that. I really mean that. Because we can't be expected to carry a country. I do like the O Canada, right? It's a beautiful thing. I think we're going to have to keep it for the 51st state. I call him Governor Trudeau.
All right, how decisive was President Trump in the Canadian election? Our friend Jonathan Martin at Politico heard from Republican Congressman Don Bacon overnight. Yes, Republican Congressman. Bacon told him, quote, The Liberals in Canada were losing big until our president kept mocking Canadians, our neighbors and close friends. He made Canadian Liberals great again. Let's get right to CNN's Paula Newton in Ottawa for this really election stunner. 4 months ago, no one would have predicted this.
And good morning, John. In fact, Donald Trump's first 100 days consequential here in Canada. John, this was so history-making that when you speak to pollsters, they talk about not having seen this kind of party resurrection in modern political history in almost any democracy around the world. Think about that. And that was because the man, Prime Minister Mark Carney, met the moment with what? His resume. He's not exactly the most charismatic campaigner, but Canadians put their faith in him in order to bargain, to negotiate with Donald Trump. And I want to talk about something else as well, something that will reverberate in many different countries right now going forward as they all face the Trump administration.
And this is what Jordan Peterson said. Jordan Peterson said Trump is going to have, or Trump's administration is going to have a hard time with Mark Carney if he becomes the Prime Minister of Canada. Unfortunately, he has now been projected to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. And this is going to be hard on the Trump administration because Canada is supposed to be our ally. There will still be our ally, but Mark Carney is not going to take so many, words being spoken at him by Trump because he's going to do what he has to do as well, which is make life hard for Americans if Trump keeps going the way he's going. However, Trump is a master negotiator, okay? Trump is a master negotiator. He has to figure out what Canadians want, which, of course, he's mentioned that Canada, the United States subsidize Canada for $200 billion every year. And he said, Justin Trudeau said, without these money that Canada is getting from the United States, Canada will cease to exist. According to Trump, he said Justin Trudeau told him that. And it's like, okay. But Jordan Peterson said, the fact that Mark Carney even has a chance to become the Prime Minister is because of Trump. And Trump saying he wants to make Canada the 51st state. He said Poilievre would have actually been the next Prime Minister. But with the whole conversation and the way Trump has been speaking, these has allowed the Liberals and the left in Canada to stand up and say, you know what, we're going to fight for Canada. And now Mark Carney is the next Prime Minister. This is not going to be a walk in the park for Trump when it comes to Mark Carney. That's just another problem added to the list of problems.
Carney harnessed that anger, that betrayal that Canadians felt every time the president spoke about a 51st state or Governor Trudeau, which of course was the man that Mark Carney took over from. He harnessed that. He stiffens spines, he talks about sacrifice, and he's getting Canadians ready for what will be a tough negotiation with the president. Listen.
When I sit down with President Trump, it will be to discuss the future economic and security relationship between two sovereign nations. And it will be with our full knowledge that we have many, many other options than the United States to build prosperity for all Canadians.
Really? Mark Carney calling this a hinge moment, right? That pivot, which he intends to execute now that he is Prime Minister. John, I want to make clear this was a close election in terms of the popular vote. Canada really splitting between the Liberals of Mark Carney and the Conservatives of Pierre Poilievre. That man did not manage to even win his seat just outside here in Ottawa. Some people called him too Trumpian, but he too is at historic highs in the popular vote. What does all that mean? It means Canada itself, stop me when this sounds familiar, is really leaning on two-party politics. They want strong leaders to face the kind of threat that is coming from the White House. And right now, Mark Carney says he is getting ready for negotiations, using the word, again, John, of sacrifice, preparing Canadians for what's to come. John?
Really could have ripple effects all around the world in terms of what Donald Trump is trying to do. Paula Newton, great to see you this morning. Thank you very much.
So let's get more on the Canadian election now from Professor Michael Keating, Emeritus Professor of Politics at the University of Aberdeen and Honorary Professor at the University of Edinburgh. Appreciate you joining us. So Canada's Liberal Party is projected to win the federal election led by Mark Carney in a stunning political comeback. Votes are still being counted, but how do you expect this to land in the end?
It's not clear whether Carney will get an absolute majority, but he will certainly form the next government because he's the biggest party. They're ahead in the popular vote. If he doesn't get a majority, he'll have to seek support from the smaller parties, most likely the New Democratic Party, which is a centre-left party, which has been doing very badly, but they may pick up half a dozen seats, and that might be critical to forming the next government.
Now, in his victory speech, Carney asked, and I'm quoting here, "Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?" How much of this Liberal Party win was due to the Trump factor, with Donald Trump's trade war with Canada and, of course, his constant threats to make the country the 51st US state?
Oh, a great deal. Canadians are very proud of their independence. And they don't dislike the United States, but they're very keen to tell you that they are not Americans, they're not part of the United States. And that kind of language is going to produce a reaction. All the parties in Canada, Quebec nationalists included, had to say, no, we'll stand up for Canada. But Carney was the most effective in doing that because the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, had been seen as having some affinities with Trump and as quite close to Trump. So Carney was the one who is in a better position to speak in defense of Canada. It should be said, however, the Conservative vote also went up. Both parties went up. And at the expense of the small parties, I mentioned the New Democratic Party. There's a Quebec Nationalist Party, the Bloc Québécois, who may get some seats in Parliament as well. So a win for Carney, but not an overwhelming win, because nevertheless it's remarkable because they were 25 points behind just a few months ago. I've never seen such a massive turnaround in such a short period of time in any democratic system.
Yes, of course. And Mark Carney is a Harvard-educated economist with a master's degree and doctorate from Oxford University. He's also a former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. So how will he likely take on Donald Trump and his tariffs? And how will he prevent a recession in Canada?
Well, that's remarkable. He's an Oxford-educated banker. He's just the sort of people that the populists would target. That is quite remarkable. Hardly an ordinary man of the people, but nevertheless, he speaks with some authority. And at a time of uncertainty like this, people are looking for somebody who doesn't have political experience, but has a lot of credibility and has run two central banks. The challenges facing the country are enormous. Even without the threat from President Trump, there are problems with growth, problems with productivity, there are problems with inflation and the cost of living. And these are big problems, and Canada's dependence on energy is in some sense a strength, but it's also a weakness at a time when we're supposed to be transitioning to net to zero. As far as Trump is concerned, this is a huge challenge. Carney has certainly been able to speak up for Canada and to criticize Trump very frankly in a way that some other leaders, such as the British leader, have not been able to. But he's got to deal with the United States. The United States takes 85% of Canada's trade. There's got to be some kind of deal. Otherwise, the economic consequences for Canada could be quite devastating.
Michael Keating, thank you so much.
Well, like you heard, Mark Carney definitely is connected when it comes to banking. You heard him when he said the central bank. He is definitely connected. And this guy would be maybe not like a formidable foe for Trump. President Xi, in my opinion, is just like the only person who can go, well, not like head to head with Trump, but China and the economy is huge, unlike Canada. It is going to be hard for Mark Carney to kind of rile Trump. It's going to be hard. But, it's pretty much a liberal. So let's see how this plays out. All right, Kevin O'Leary. Everybody knows Kevin O'Leary, a.k.a. Mr.
Canada's
Wonder.
Liberal Party is projected by Canadian media to form the government in the nation's elections, which means Mark Carney will keep
who is Canadian as well. Let's listen to what
his
he has to
job
say.
as prime minister. Now, it's not clear whether they'll be in the majority or the minority, but remember here, President Trump weighed in on this, of course, trolling Canada to become America's 51st state. So Trump seems to have handed this one to the Liberals. The Conservatives had a pretty big lead before Trump started talking about the 51st state. And then this morning, Trump sends out a Truth Social post that says, if Canada becomes the cherished 51st state of the United States of America, no more artificially drawn line from many years ago. Look how beautiful this landmass would be. It makes no sense unless Canada is a state. That pissed people off.
It's remarkable what happened because Carney actually did the policy for the Liberal Party that devastated the Canadian country and brought poverty to 25% of the population. And he was masterfully able to say, stop looking at my past record. Look at this guy south of the border. He's evil and he wants to eat us. And I will defend you because I was once in a room with him years ago. It was brilliant.
And Trump made it easy.
We don't know if he's going to win a majority government. It's too tight right now. I'm watching the polls myself. If he wins a minority, it's kind of misery for him because then the Liberals and the Democrats, the Conservatives, in Canada, will have to fight it out to get policy. And of course, it's so divided.
This is Trump.
No,
doing this,
but Trump actually, you're right.
Yeah.
He decided the fate of the Canadian election, and unfortunately it went against him in the sense that he would have been better off with a conservative government. Because now...
Let me just play a little bit of... This is some sound from voters who are going to the polls today, talked about why they were voting.
Most top of mind is Canadian sovereignty and maintaining that Canada continues to be a sovereign nation.
I think who I voted for would be the best to take care of Trump, because Trump is, I'm sorry to say, an ass, and he shouldn't even be president of the United States. But because he is, we need a strong person so that we could stand strong.
That's just wild. It's wild how people just really never think about a lot before they go voting and actually do their own research. But she's saying, well, we need someone who's strong, who can handle Trump. Trump? That's your problem? No. Your problem should be Canadians. How do we get a better economy? How do we get better resolutions for conflicts happening socially in Canada? These are the things that you have to worry about. You're worried about Trump. Trump is not even a Canadian.
I mean, I think the people are always asking, is he joking? Is he serious? He keeps talking about it, and he talks about it incredibly seriously, Anna.
Well, I mean, whether he's serious or he's joking is frankly not the point, because what he has effectively achieved is to antagonize ally after ally, right? He is a domestic factor in politics in Mexico, in Panama, in Canada. All of these were our friends.
It's just wild how Trump is this influential. He's this powerful. He's this important. He can influence an election that is not even an American election. Isn't this just bonkers? How is this man influencing Canadian election, Panama election, like countries around the world? This is wow.
And our allies. And he is the deciding factor in some of these elections and what happens there. And also I'm telling you this. As a Floridian, I am extremely worried by all of the Canadians and the French and the Europeans and the Mexicans who are telling me they are canceling their trips and their vacations to the United States. Yes, they are.
Canadians and Americans have the same DNA. They can't afford to come to the U.S. anymore. Their dollar's lost 40% of its value.
Kevin,
$68,000.
I didn't go deep on the dollar, right? But I'm just saying, Canadians have said that they don't want to come because of Trump. And not just to Florida, but places like Maine. Right across the border. I mean, look, you can make an argument about the dollar, but I think it's really about the politics of it all.
There's something very ironic about them talking about sovereignty because, of course, Justin Trudeau suspended all civil liberties in Canada over the Freedom Convoy by invoking the Emergencies Act. He imprisoned political prisoners. 2 of them are still in prison, Tony Oleanic and Chris Carbert. And he just has this face of liberalism, but it's actually authoritarianism. And so to see Canadians sort of, I know, but I'm saying they're voting for his party all over again.
He's gone.
Yeah, there's been
I think the question is,
there's been no sense that anybody is owed anything. Don't Canadians get
to decide who runs their country?
They have made a decision, but
they've made a decision. So let's see what happens.
Was the idiot king, and Carney was able to get the stink off his suit from that because he gave all the policy, including a bill called C-69, which stopped capital coming to Canada.
Ashley, go ahead.
No, I yield to my friend. I mean, that's Canada nice. They got the Canadians to start cursing, right? I mean, remember Trump said we're going to get respected around the world again, but now we're hated. I mean, you got Canadians boycotting Florida.
You should see the things they say about him in Spanish in Panama and Mexico.
I mean, I think, fine, sure, everything you
Who cares? Who cares what they're saying about Trump? Like, I don't understand why these people were brought up by, well, I don't know how they were brought up, but when you talk like this, you could tell that you don't have your own mind. I don't care if people like me. Like, you don't have to like me as long as I am responsible for the things that I say that I am going to do. Okay? Like, I only have to, I get it. He is the president of the free world. So, he needs people to sort of agree with him and like him to some extent. But not everybody has to like it. I mean, over 70 million people voted for Trump. So not everybody voted for Trump, and not everybody's going to like Trump. I get it. But you should see the face they make when they talk about Trump in Mexico. Who cares? Of course, they're going to say things about him because he's deporting people back to Mexico, back to El Salvador, back everywhere. So you're saying, well, you should see the face they make. You should see when they talk about. He's concerned about Americans, okay? Americans are his number one priority. So Mexicans or whatever countries you're talking about Trump, I don't think that really should be his concern. So, yeah.
And Donald Trump said that he was going to make Canada the 51st state, and come to find out, people don't actually like to be spoken about like that. They actually like to be treated with some respect, and so he activated a base of his party. I think this is actually interesting, though, when you look at it on the global setting. Many countries were actually starting to vote more and more conservative, and Canada this is a trend. Now, if based on the first 99 days, it seems like Trump has a strategy of activating and antagonizing our allies. And as future national elections come up with different countries where they were starting to lean more conservative, I'm interested to see if it activates another part of across the globe to start pushing back on actual authoritarianism, not what Justin Trudeau was doing. Yeah, that Liberal Party was about to get crushed in those elections before Trump started talking about the 51st state. So the Liberals should owe Donald Trump a gift basket. He's the one who got them elected.
Either way, if they had become part of America, it would have been yet another liberal state. I don't know if Donald Trump would have liked that very much.
Oh, my goodness.
100 days ago at this hour, Donald Trump took the oath of office as the 47th president of the United States of America. And what a turbulent, convention-smashing 100 days it's been as the president moves at a frenetic pace to transform the United States and its role in the world. there have been obvious successes, like illegal border crossings plunging to the lowest level in decades, and some things not so successful, like trillions of dollars lost in the markets. It's been the most chaotic first 100 days in modern presidential history, from taking a sledgehammer to the federal government to targeting political opponents and launching a global trade war. The chaos of the last 100 days is a feature, not a bug. It's always been an intrinsic part of Donald Trump's style, and unlike in his first term, the president is now surrounded by people who want the chaos. For millions of his hardcore supporters, this is what they voted for in November. But nearly 6 months after Election Day, a flurry of new polls show the president has lost the middle. Less than a third of independents approve of the Trump presidency so far. And a new CNN poll out this morning reveals that 41% say they're afraid about the rest of the president's term. Another 1,362 days. I want to start with CNN's Jeff Zeleny, who is in Warren, Michigan. That is where the president is heading later today for a rally. Macomb County, it is probably the most famous political county in the country. Jeff.
There's no doubt it is, Dana, and that is why President Trump is coming here to Macomb County, Michigan. It tells a story not only of our changing American politics, but how Donald Trump arose to the White House and returned again. He won Macomb County, just north of Detroit, by 14 points. And of course, that helped seal his statewide win in Michigan. However, as he takes a victory lap today, there is deep concern on the economy. There's deep concern over the on-again, off-again tariff policy, including the White House. Again today, the president signing a new executive order, he will be, to ease auto tariffs once again. That is good news for some auto manufacturers here, Dana, but just gives you a sense of the chaotic nature, as you talked about, of the first 100 days. But the president coming here for a reason, to make the point that he is invested in remaking American manufacturing. But what he also needs to do, as the White House well knows, is to sell his economic agenda. This is actually the first time he's visiting a battleground state for a rally like this. He's spent much more time in the White House or at Mar-a-Lago, but he's back on the road and talking to voters here and Republicans. They believe he has some selling left to do. Dana?
Jeff, thank you so much for that report. And today we're going to take a step back to look at how President Trump's first 100 days have transformed America and what comes next. Here's just some of what happened so far. On day one, President Trump pardoned more than 1,000 January 6 rioters. He's cut at least 121,000 people from the federal workforce, used his famous Sharpie to sign more than 200 executive orders and proclamations, shuttered USAID, slashed the Education Department and Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, declared a national emergency on the southern border, deported scores of alleged gang members to a prison in El Salvador, moved to punish perceived political enemies inside and outside the government, removed countless DEI initiatives, withdrew from the World Health Organization and Paris Climate Accord, slashed funding for scientific research at the NIH and top universities, took over the Kennedy Center, threatened to withhold funding from universities, signed an order proclaiming only two sexes and banning transgender women from female sports, criticized Ukraine's president in the Oval Office, and held high-level talks with Russia. And there are those sweeping tariffs, of course. This is actually not even close to comprehensive. I'm joined now by a terrific group of reporters on this 100th day of Trump 2.0. CNN's David Chalian, CNN's Jamie Gangel, Laura Barone-Lopez of the PBS NewsHour, and CNN's Phil Mattingly.
So you're saying he's been quiet and sleeping on the job.
You gotta catch your breath.
I'm going to go around the horn. One sentence to describe the last 100 days.
Well, as you just encapsulated, I would say my sentence is, in these first 100 days, he's taken significant steps to upend the domestic economy and the global order, and now begs the question to voters, if this is the change they still believe in, to borrow a phrase from political history. And at the moment, voters seem to have questions about that.
That's more than one sentence. It's the economy, stupid, to quote James Carville. Look, all of those things that you talked about and more, absolutely. But I think right now, what we're looking at is he promised the best economy, not to steal Phil Mattingly's subject, and we're not there.
I'm going to quote the Reagan-appointed judge from the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, Harvey Wilkinson, because I think that it encapsulates the confrontation that the courts are potentially headed for with the administration. I mean, Harvey Wilkinson, again, a Reagan-appointed judge, said it takes no small amount of imagination to understand that this is a path of perfect lawlessness, one that the courts cannot condone when talking about this administration's actions on deportations.
Joke's on Jamie. I can talk about economics for the better part of 6 or 7 hours.
Nonstop. We've got a lot more to talk about.
My sentence is you break it, you own it. And I'm not saying that to be snarky or even critical on some level, but when it comes to the economy, the Trump administration inherited a solid, stable economy from the Biden administration. There are plenty of concerns on prices, but that's what they brought in terms of the underlying data points. The euphoria that was described by chief executive officers at Davos at the start of the administration, the speed with which that has completely fallen off a cliff, not just for the business community, but for everyday consumers, consumer confidence at its lowest point since the pandemic. It's a mess right now, based on what people think is coming, based on what the president delivering on what he said he was going to do.
And on that very note, we have a new round of numbers from our latest poll on the economy. And this is very telling. And David, I want you to weigh in on this. Trump's policies have improved economic conditions, 27%. Worsened economic conditions, 59%. 59%. So almost 6 in 10 Americans. And this is not just about the economy that is happening. It is about the economy that is happening because of Trump's policies from the perspective of these voters.
Yeah, and by the way, that 59% number just last month in March was 51%. We don't see that kind of movement usually in American
He's moving
politics.
fast.
In 1 month time,
That's the thing. Like, Trump is moving so fast that, of course, he's going to make mistakes. He's not just going to be, gliding all through. He's definitely going to make mistakes because he's moving fast. He's moving absolutely fast because he doesn't have time. He has 4 years to go, right? Well, 3 years to go, 3 years and some, maybe 200 days. But he has to move fast. Plus, midterms are coming, and he has to make a point. So, from DOGE to cutting the educational department, taking it back to the state, even though it was already somewhat with the state, but federal funding, he's now moving that to the state. And now he's promoting school choice, which I support 1,000% because, I don't want my daughter to be confined to a zip code when it comes to education for, our kids. So with that being said, who is doing this polls? Like, are they going to Democrat zones, or are they going to independent zones, or are they going to Republican zones? Like, how are they conducting this polls?
So now, as you noted, it's 6 in 10. That is not a good number for the president. Now, inside the White House, they will tell you this is precisely that short-term pain that we anticipated, that we knew these policies would sort of inject into the system, but that there will be a long-term gain. How long will Americans give him the benefit of the doubt? Obviously, his supporters will hang in there longer than independents will, as we're already seeing.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the Treasury Secretary go out first thing this morning and talk about the tariffs only being one part of the larger economic picture and talking about the fact that there are other things to come. I mean, we'll see. And what you're seeing on the screen, by the way, Jamie, these are CNN headlines. And it could go on for days, just to sort of remind people some of the examples. And as we keep talking of all of the tsunami of news that we have gotten because of the just frenetic nature of 100 days.
So whether we're talking about the economy or immigration or federal workers, there's been a lot of whiplash. There's been chaos, there's been confusion, but there's policy whiplash. It leads to uncertainty. And the Treasury Secretary can come out and promise, and the White House can come out and promise, but you listen to prominent CEOs, Wall Street, business leaders, no one knows what Donald Trump will do next. 2.0 is very different from 1.0. To quote, I think it was the Wall Street Journal editorial board, they said at 100 days, Trump 2.0 is in trouble. So the White House can say this is short-term pain, but certainly consumers don't see it and the business community doesn't.
Well, and speaking of consumers and the business community, there was a pretty important development that just happened. It continues to develop, but we saw a big shift right before we came on air. And this has to do with Amazon and President Trump and Jeff Bezos. What happened?
Yeah, speaking of needing 7 hours to explain something. So Punchbowl News, our great friends and colleagues over at Punchbowl News broke the story this morning that one of the offshoot websites of Amazon was going to post the price differential based on tariffs on the website so consumers would see it. You've actually seen companies do this in the past with inflation prices, those things like that. Trump, according to our colleague Elena Treen, with great reporting, picked up the phone and called Bezos, who he's gotten increasingly close with over the course of the last several months, was very upset about what happened. Now Amazon is saying that is not under consideration. It will not be implemented. They backed off. And I think there's a bigger picture here that's important to note. Trump has a level of authority and influence over the business community that he never had before now. The problem in this specific case is Amazon is one of hundreds of thousands of companies that are trying to grapple with, okay, do we eat these prices? Do we pass them on to consumers? How do we kind of deal with this going forward? And it would become a game of whack-a-mole to be able to knock out every single company and jawbone them away from doing that. It's just kind of getting to the uncertainty idea right now. The underlying economy is good. The numbers are still good. Inflation is good, wages are good, jobs are good. What everybody's looking forward to is what Amazon was trying to figure out when they were considering this proposal for one of their offshoot websites, which is things are about to potentially get really bad. And just the perception of that in a consumer-driven economy can lead to those things actually happening, whether they're going to or not.
And what I think there's a difference between a mom and pop shop in Minnesota putting on their website the differential price and a multi-billionaire company that probably can afford to take the hit on tariffs to some extent without passing it on to the consumer. And it was that the politics of that gave the White House and Trump in that phone call to Bezos, I'm sure, a bit of a card to play.
Even if Amazon has backed off, there are a lot of those small businesses across the country that are making it very clear that they're saying to their the people that buy their products, look, this stroller that you're